Hi, my name is Nicole Davis. I've been doing family history for about 25 years. I started when I was 19. It talked a lot about it in my patriarchal blessing, and I took a class at BYU and immediately felt that fire. And the stake that I've been in has been a great support in bringing this work forth. And we've just noticed there's a lot of great tips out there, and we wanted to share them with other people because we found a lot of success in them. This first PowerPoint talks a little bit about that. It's called the macro vision of family history. And President Uchtdorf tells us that once we know the why of what we're doing, we really get inspired. And so that's kind of what we hope with this PowerPoint. When I started doing family history, I started thinking it seems like we need our work done in order to be resurrected. I wasn't sure, and I asked around, and people weren't sure on the doctrine of that. But I came across this quote by Wilford Woodruff, and it says, "I look upon this portion of our ministry as a mission of as much importance as preaching to the living. The dead will hear the voice of the servants of God in the spirit world, and they cannot come forth in the morning of the first resurrection unless certain ordinances are performed for them." So it really made me realize we are literally helping lay the foundation of the millennium. And it talks about in the restoration of the gospel that all would be wasted at his coming if it wasn't for the restoration. So it's amazing to think we're part of this work. One general authority in our mission said that if Family Search is not the book of life, it's the preparation for the book of life. So think about how amazing to think about the Lord preparing people to work on the book of life, and that we are these people. We are these saviors on Mount Zion. And I can't think of anything more exciting or any more exciting time in the world to be a part of. Recently at Roots Tech, Elder Anderson spoke, and he said, "One of the most magnificent doctrines of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ is that every man, woman, and child who has ever lived upon the earth, who has breathed the air of this world, will have the opportunity to clearly understand and accept or reject the life-giving doctrines of the Savior. No one will be set aside or coerced. No one will be forgotten. It is not an assignment for the faint of heart. How vast is the work before us? It will touch every person who has ever lived. How many have lived upon the earth? We honestly don't know. One scientist estimated that it could be as high as 100 billion. That was from Elder Anderson at Roots Tech, and they said that more general authorities speak at Roots Tech than any other area other than General Conference. It just shows how important this work and what they're trying to do to hasten it. Roughly in the last 200 years, the church has done about 1 billion names. So think about how much work there still is to do. A lot of people think their work is done or they can't find anything, and we're here to prove them wrong, to debunk those myths, and help them successfully find tons of names that are out there ready to have their work done. This is from a great website called Wait But Why, and it kind of shows you just how many people are related to it. Recently, a gentleman did the world's largest family reunion of over 1 million people, and it shows really how connected and interrelated we are. So this would be us, and every generation our line doubles. So when you go back just a few generations, you see how fast we have so many grandparents. If you go back just 12 generations, you have about 4,000 grandparents. So that's pretty crazy. A lot of people like to focus just on their own surname, the name that they're used to hearing. But you need to remember we're related to a lot more people than that we need to focus on. And then if you take one of those generations forward again, if each one of those sets of grandparents, which would be about 2,000 people, had 3 kids and 3 kids back to right now, that would be 1 billion descendants. That would be about 1 billion cousins you have. Just if one of those grandparents had 3 kids back to today, that would be 1 million descendants. A lot of people don't realize that they can be related to that many people, and we literally are. I mean, when push comes to shove, we are related to everybody, and it's just a matter of when. A kind of an interesting concept is the blue line shows you that your line is doubling, but the red line shows that the population has decreased in the past. So what does that mean? What does our big family tree look like? Well, if you look at the huge human race family tree, it kind of looks like a diamond shape. And that's because who's our first parents? Adam and Eve. So eventually we're all going to find that we connect together, and it's just figuring out where. Now what happens is one anthropologist said that 80% of the world is married to their second or third cousin. And that kind of sounds crazy. Like, what are you talking about? How can that be? Well, we forget that we're actually kind of the anomaly living here in the United States. We're hundreds of millions of people just randomly thrown here, and so we really don't see how we can be related. But if you go back to Germany, that's just the size of Oregon. Or you go back to Italy, these are little countries. And so many of the world right now, third world countries, haven't traveled. They've been living in the same villages for centuries, and so they've just been marrying within the communities, and a lot of those are family and relatives. When second and third cousins marry, they're going to share a grandparent eventually back. And when you share grandparents, then your line will eventually collapse into that diamond shape. And so that pretty much happens to all our lines eventually. Another interesting prospect is DNA now. DNA is breaking a lot of doors wide open to help find lines. They're great for African American lines that are more difficult. They're great for some adoptive lines. So if you're interested in getting your DNA done, you can do that with multiple websites, and it really, really helps with family history. If you look at these little circles, they show kind of the areas that are clumped in DNA. A lot of North American DNA is in similar regions. A lot of Asian is in similar regions. And you can start, it'll start linking you with people online with that same DNA. So it's a great, great resource. Howard W. Hunter said, with regard to temple and family history work, I have one overriding message. The work must hasten. The work waiting to be done is staggering and escapes human comprehension. Last year, we performed proxy temple endowments for about 5.5 million persons, but during that year, 50 million persons died. This might suggest futility in the work that lies before us, but we cannot think of futility. Surely the Lord will support us if we use our best efforts and carry out the commandments to do family history research and temple work. The great work of the temples and all that supports it must expand. It's imperative. Now, Howard W. Hunter made this quote in 1995. So that was right around when the internet was taking place. So that was about 5.5 million. I'm not sure what the number is right now, but even if we've gotten up to 6 million, maybe 10 million, if you have 6 million names in 10 years, that puts you at 60 million, 100 years, 600 million, 1,000 years, which is the length of the millennium, we're at 6 billion, so we haven't even broken the surface. So we really need to step up our game. I tell people to hasten the work isn't just having a few names on your account and taking a few years to do them. We really want to get all these people their ordinances and blessings, and with all the tools the Lord has provided us, the internet and the records, we can do this and we can bring this work forward. Sometimes people feel a little overwhelmed when we talk about it. Think about 100 billion names. It just seems staggering. This is an artist who is feeling a little overwhelmed in his studio, and so sometimes that's how people feel. I tell people to compare the work with like a jigsaw puzzle. Family history is like the world's biggest jigsaw puzzle, and what a lot of people are doing is they're focusing on one little piece, one great-great-grandfather that they want to break, which is great. I tell them, let's look at it and see if we can break it. But just like a jigsaw puzzle, if you can't get it to fit, you don't just say, well, it's all done, and walk away, because we know there's a lot of other pieces that could fit, and over time it'll all mesh and come together. So I tell people, if we can't find that one great-great-grandpa that you want to break, that's okay. We'll set it down and let's look on some of the other stuff, just like a jigsaw puzzle where you work on the grass and the sky, and then over time it comes together. We're going to check the cousins, we're going to check other lines, we're going to check descendants. And so in that way, I guarantee you get a lot more work done and a lot more names of the temple, and I know those spirits on the other side are really, really thankful for that. One tool I've used, I've shared this in my mission, and they loved it. Even a lot of people in my mission weren't able to find names. A lot of people think if I have Mormon pioneer lines, it's all done, everybody's done it, and there hasn't been anybody that we haven't found names for, and that's because populations keep multiplying forward, people keep passing away, and there's always new people that are ready to have their work done. My general rule that I do for most people, especially Mormon pioneer lines, and this is a great tip that can help pretty much anyone, but I try to, if you have a Mormon pioneer line, I tell them go to the first ancestor that has been in America. And you might have to look around. Some might have immediately went to Europe, and that's fine. You can check out those lines too. But the U.S. ones are a little bit easier for beginners because they're more familiar with those records. This was actually my mission leader's tree, and she didn't think she could find any names, so I used it as an example, and within 10 or 15 minutes, and that's usually about the average, we found a half a dozen names. So we go to that first ancestor that went to the United States, and if you click on his name in the family tree, family search, a little box opens, and you click on tree. What that does is it puts him in the root primary position. And that way you can start looking at his descendants. A lot of people are thinking linear. They're just going grandfather, great-grandfather. They're trying to get back. But most of the population is multiplying forward. So that's where we want to look if we're looking for names on more difficult lines. So on her line, we moved forward. We immediately found some holes, and you can see them where the red arrows are. None of them had spouses, and so we were able to find census records, attach those spouses, and get their work done. The church has done a great job with putting colored icons for you to help you recognize if there's records or sources for these people. There's an example where if you click on the blue square on one of the gentlemen, you'll see that there's a record for his family. And if you're not sure on the colors, go to that legend on the upper right-hand side, and they'll tell you what the different colors mean to kind of help you get going. Once you find a light blue square, you know there's a possible record for him that you can review, and in this case there was a census record, and it showed that he had 2 sons, and they weren't showing in family search. So we can click it and look at the record and review and attach it. And when you review and attach it, it shows 2 columns. On the right is what's in family search, and on the left is what's on the record. And you can add over the information from the record into family search and add over the children that are missing, and then click attach. It's really amazing. This is one of the best new features of family search. It's only been around a year, and everybody was excited. A lot of the missionaries were too, because it really helps source, document, get the names in place, and get their work done very, very fast. So within a few minutes, we could reserve these 2 names if there aren't any duplicates. If there are, you want to resolve those duplicates and merge them. Before the internet, 50% of temple work was being duplicated. Since the internet and this great new program through Family Search, they've gotten it down to 5%. So you can feel a little more confident now that if you see something with a green square and it doesn't have any duplicates, you can feel confident that they need their work done. So you can go ahead and click that request button, reserve the individual, and take their names to the temple. Another great tool to find names, and this church policy allows you to look a little more generally, and it's kind of that macroscope I'm talking about. I have Pollys in my line, and they're from Babenheim, Germany. And I didn't really know the exact connection, but you can do a search on Family Search just for the last name, Polly, from Babenheim, Germany. And if you start finding records with the same last name and the same location, you can put their information in the system. Brother Hansen is from the Philippines, and he said he went over to the Philippines and found last names that were the same as him from the same town, but he wasn't sure how they all fit together. And again, like that jigsaw puzzle, you're allowed to start connecting small families, and over time they eventually will connect to your families, and you can reserve their work and get it done, and eventually you will make those connections, and it will become that big vast tree that we want. Once you reserve the names, you want to go to your temple list. And if you get confused on your temple list, they also have a legend to help you with the different colors. When you're ready to do the temple work, click on temple on the top of your screen, and it takes you to the temple list. And you can click on legend, it shows you all the colors. So there's lots of different options you can do. Check the name on the left and decide if you want to print it and take it to the temple and make a card. You could decide to share it with Salt Lake to distribute around the world. I do that all the time because I have tons of names and I want to get them done. You could also share them with friends and family and just send them in an email, and they can start getting them done. If you feel you're overwhelmed, you can also unreserve them. So there's lots of different options. They just want you to get involved, do them, get that work to the temple, and they're pretty flexible with different options of how to do that. Okay, one other way that I found very helpful to get family history done and find names is through Ancestry.com. If you are not aware, Ancestry.com and Family Search have kind of teamed up, and they've given LDS members a free subscription. This is a $400 international subscription, so it's great to take advantage of this. If you have the church's old path file, which stands for personal ancestral file. You can upload it here and start looking for record hints here because they have some different databases that might break some of those lines. If you don't have a PATH file, that's okay. You can upload a 4-generation from Family Search. But I tell people it's great to have a tree here because you're advertising your tree out there, and Ancestry.com has 9 million people visiting their website. I think ours is about 2 million. So the more places you have your tree, the more likely you're going to have those long-lost relatives contact you and find out more information. I find stuff all the time, and people contact me all the time. Sometimes I go to family reunions. It's amazing. So it's a great resource that I would recommend to get involved in as well. I hope you found this presentation helpful. I want you guys to be as successful as we have in our stake, and I think these tips would really help you guys get there. I have a testimony of this work. I know how important it is. I know how the Lord wants us all involved, and I leave that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.